All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. We're very excited to have you all here with us today. We want to take a little time to go through something that we're very passionate about here at Cloud Academy, which is designing and delivering a structured training program for large teams. We'll focus on large teams, but we'll make some distinctions of how we can roll this out for smaller teams as well. So we're very excited again to have you here. I'm excited to be joined by a couple of my colleagues that I partner with to work on these rollouts for some of our customers. Very briefly, my name is Mark Smith. I'm a solutions engineer. Part of my role here at Cloud Academy is to work with our customers and prospective customers to get a real idea of where they're at in their current state of their digital transformation, and then get an idea of where they're headed in the future and help position the Cloud Academy platform, not just from a content perspective. The content is great in there, but also on the platform side of things to make sure that you have everything set up for a successful rollout to help you meet the milestones as you move forward. Joining me today, I've got Andy Larkin, who's our head of content, and Ryan Newell. I'm excited to have them partner with me to go over some of this content. So I just want to quickly let them have a moment to introduce themselves. So Andy, if you'll start us off.
Oh yeah, Andy here, head of content for Cloud Academy. I spend most of my days helping businesses get the ultimate or maximum ROI from technology. So ensuring that we have a training plan worked out that's going to help you get to the point where you need to be is one of the things that I'm very passionate about. So that's it from me.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy.
Great.
Ryan?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ryan Newell. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Cloud Academy, where my team and I are responsible for ensuring that our customers are absolutely delighted with our training platform experience and receive as much value and return on investment as possible throughout the entire service term. It's really great to be here. I look forward to sharing more details about our Customer Success program with you in a moment.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. So just to kind of set the backdrop here for a little bit, we'll each have some areas where we're going to focus on, which is indicative of kind of the way that we roll things out when customers sign up with us. We'll pull from some of the experience that we've had, particularly with Andy and some of the experiences he had before he came to Cloud Academy. We all can pull for some of that requisite experience coming there. And then also what we've actually done with some of our customers. So some real life actual examples of things we see. The first up is going to be Andy Larkin kind of walking through some of the business transformation, why is it difficult, and some of the effective techniques that we've had kind of moving into that. So with that, Andy, if you'll start us off.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I think the first thing that we've probably all realized at some point is just that transformation is actually quite a difficult thing to achieve. And if it was that easy, we'd all be doing a lot more of it, right? I think most of us have had that opportunity to try and bring a new technology or a way of doing things into a business and been very excited about what it is and all the benefits it can bring. But often we've always found it difficult to get people to see the same way and to get as excited as we do about how quickly we can stand up server instances with cloud technologies, or maybe it's just in the ways of working around projects with things like Agile. So I think the fundamental thing I take away from every one of the transformation projects I've worked on is that it's just not that easy. And it's going to take quite a lot of heavy lifting to make sure that a transformation project works. So there's a few things that I think are worthwhile just reminding ourselves of before we start thinking about how we actually go about it and making sure we get the plan in place. Now, the first thing, of course, is that it's involving people. So it requires behavioral change, which is always the difficult part of any kind of transformation project. We have to get everybody as excited about what we think is the good way of doing things for them to actually get involved. And a lot of that comes back to motivation. So you need to sort of start thinking about how can I personally motivate other members of our organization to start thinking and doing things differently. That's going to be a key part of whether or not this program is going to succeed or not. And the second challenge really is that it involves a lot of process. So if we're moving from a waterfall approach to using Agile, for example, or we're looking at implementing DevOps methodologies in our business, then process needs to change. And that's always something that's difficult as well. We all know that. There's many obstacles to changing process in large organizations, whether they be because things have been in the business for a long time. They may be inherited processes that we just have seemingly no way of changing, that we've just always done it this way, but even though we know it's not right. So we kind of need to drive an adoption of baseline skills and have everybody move at the same pace if we're going to try and overcome some of those process issues. And of course, the third one is always time. There's never enough time to get this stuff done. We generally have an executive team or a CEO who's saying to us, just transform this business. I want to make things smarter, faster, and better. Now go and do it. And often it's something that people would like to see in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. So it's often very, very difficult because people get a lot of pressure put on them to try and change things quickly. And often that pressure turns to frustration when things don't quite happen in the time frame that they thought it would. So we really need to be sure that we can demonstrate small steps done often when we're going forward on a transformation project. We don't just want to try and expect to do things overnight and hope that everything's going to be just fine the next day. It never works out that way. We all know that. We need to be taking small steps done often, and ideally having a way of showing those steps as progress so that all of us can see, wow, we've moved from A to B and we're on our way to C and D. This is great. I think it's very important for driving a good transformation project. So, Mark, can you just drop us to the next slide there?
Yeah, and I should say, I failed to mention this before, but if you do have any questions, we'll hold a Q&A at the end. You can feel free to type those in the chat box as well. So feel free to do those. I put a note in there for you, but yeah, absolutely type any questions that you may have as we move along, and we'll answer those at the end. Sorry about that, Andy. Go ahead.
That's all right. No, I'm very focused on sort of getting the operational and business buy-in for these type of projects, because honestly, that's the thing that makes a difference between success and failure. So let's just think about how we might go about a transformation project. Now, the first thing that is important is that we define some goals. So the first thing that we always do with our customers is, basically say, have you defined your transformation objectives? Now, this can be something quite high level. It can be things like become more agile. It could be more agile in the way we do things. It could be to achieve more sales, et cetera, et cetera. There's generally a lot of those type of business objectives that have been discussed in the past, but do they actually map to a transformation objective? And so the first thing that we do is just basically work with you to make sure that we get the right stakeholders together to define some goals for a transformation program. Now, this is something that you can do yourselves. We come in and help if it's something of use to you, but generally the success metric comes from having a really good plan to start with. And let me just give you some ideas here of how this kind of plays out. Say, for example, we get together and we do a transformation readiness workshop. We're really looking at the why. Why do we want to transform this business? What is it that why is it? We have to have a very clear idea of why we are doing this, because if we don't know that from the start, it's going to be difficult for others in the organization to understand why they should be involved. Okay, so it's a very important first part. But let's just assume we did that workshop and we came up with some 3 high-level strategies for why we want to transform our insurance business. Let's just take one out of the air for a minute. First of all, management says, look, let's reduce the time it takes to launch new products, because it seems to take way too long for us to get new products out into the market. Because of all the infrastructure that has to be set up, it seems to take months and months to build a web page. We still haven't got marketing information in the market. It's just frustrating. We need to speed that up. Secondly, it could be to reduce the time it takes to process insurance claims. So one of the most common success metrics in insurance is that someone who has a claims processed very quickly is more likely to stay with that insurer. So having a very fast and efficient way of processing claims is seen as a really core part to our business objectives, right? And third, we want to reduce customer churn. Now, that's a rather ambiguous one, that you'll often find these get thrown up in front of you. Like, people start with things like, we want to be more agile. Well, you say, well, what does that mean? Let's get more specific about what agility means to you and how that can map into ROI and how it can map into a happy customer. So just assuming we started with that top level strategy, we might then look to define some programs to actually implement these things in a transformational way. So in terms of reducing the time it takes to launch new products, we might say, okay, let's reduce the provisioning time for new servers from 3 weeks to 5 days, right? Now, straight away, that's a huge improvement because it would reduce the time it takes for people to start up all the infrastructure required to support new products. So therefore, we would be solving that first business objective. Now, if we think back to the next stage, which is kind of like our learning activities, what kind of things do we need to make this program work? Well, first, we need to train the IT teams in DevOps best practices so they know how to stand up servers really quickly, right? We need to ensure that all the teams who are working with them have a very clear idea of what DevOps principles mean, so that they can talk to the IT teams in a way that both will understand and essentially they're both going to try and start working in a different way. So I'm not going to go through each of these, but you can see quickly that it's very important to get from a top-level strategy through a program that's relevant to your transformation objective down to some actual learning objectives. Now, I sort of call the transformation readiness workshop that why. Why are we doing this? Let's be very clear about why we want to do this. Often people will come to us and say, we just want to get more certified. And we go, that's fine. We can help you with that. Why do you want to get more people certified? Because you want to move up a tier with a vendor? Or do you want to just have a better number of people certified in the business? Or is it because you want to show that you've got a certain level of expertise or best practice in the business so that you know things are done properly? That would be the best place to start with certification, right? To know that people are going to do things in a secure and safe way. That's kind of why we want people to be certified. But that kind of high-level goal, it's very well worth working through the why to make sure that you really understand why we want to do this. Then the strategy I call the what. So that's basically what we need to do to achieve that why. And then the programs are the area that tend to get talked about a lot at an executive level. But this is where the transformation program and your training programs need to meet, because it's often not the case that we have a program with a map back to a learning activity. And let's be honest, if people don't know how to do this stuff, they're not going to do it very well. All right. So no matter how much we may want to reduce the provisioning time of new service from 3 weeks to 5 days, if we don't show people how to do that, they're not just going to magically do it. Like, none of us are born cloud or internet experts, right? It's all learnt. So there's no way that you can expect everyone to just suddenly start doing things differently unless you give them a way to do it. So it is very important to make that synapse change, because often, in my experience, the learning activities tend to get left right out. They're often not even considered when we're talking about business strategy. All right, so that's kind of why I see it as the most important part, to have some really simple learning activities mapped out. And again, this all comes back to having a really good definition of our training goals, which maps back to our business objectives. Okay, Mark, let's just pop on to the next slide there. All right, so just a quick idea of what that could look like. The next stage is to define a plan from our goals. So once we've been through that kind of planning session, and as the representative of learning and development or a business owner of any part, maybe you're looking after a division, maybe you're tasked with actually driving this transformation project, then the first thing you need to do is make sure that you go from that first list of ideas and programs to a plan like this, to say, okay, this is how I'm going to get people from the skills they have now to the skills they need to do this work effectively. So let's have a look at how this might play out. So for our insurance company, let's say we're going to train the IT teams on DevOps best practices. Okay, so we identified that as one of the things we would need to do if we want people to be able to spin up servers in 5 days instead of 3 weeks, right? So that's just something that we have to do. So the first thing that we do is do an assessment of the team. So the team can be massive, it can be thousands of people, it can be two people. But we always start with an assessment just to gauge where they are right now. It's very important. If we don't know where we started from, we're never going to know whether we got to the goal we wanted to get to, right? So it's very important to have that first assessment. It's very easy. We've got many ways of doing it. We use just simple questionnaires, which can be as short or long as you like. We have assessed labs, which allow you to actually go into an environment and stand up a server really, in a real way and actually prove that you can do it. So we do that first assessment. We would identify groups that we put into training plans based on that assessment. So let's assume that our DevOps team at our insurer has, say, 30 people. And when we do this first assessment, 10 of them get a really high score. They obviously know quite a lot already about DevOps principles, which is fantastic. The other 20 seem to not have much exposure to that. So great, that's the first challenge we'll solve. So the first training plan we'll put in place is to help the 20 people who don't have that DevOps knowledge to understand DevOps principles. So we put them into a training plan. It's all managed for them, so they just get everything's automated. They get an invitation. They say, hey, you've got 2 or 3 weeks to finish this training in these labs. Get into it. We'll keep reminding you along the way how you go. And ultimately, at the end of that training plan, there's an assessment to sort of give them the opportunity to prove that they've learned those skills. So straight away, if this is your program, you can show that the 20 people who had very little understanding of DevOps principles now have an average or more than average level of skill knowledge in that area. Fantastic. That is success. That's that first little iterative milestone that we've got. And the second group, who we identified early on, who had quite good skills already, we may put them into a more advanced training plan. So we might do the DevOps playbook, learning how to use all the tools together, learning best practices, and actually implementing infrastructure as code. So that may have more of a technical focus. It may be certainly more advanced, but we'd look to get everyone to that next stage after they've completed the first one. So we would step them through that, and their assessment for that second group might be an assess lab. So at the end of it, you have to do this laboratory test. It's not too difficult. It's not like a day or anything like that. It's like an hour of your time, but it allows you to show that you can do this. And for you, the program owner, you've got assurance that the team is actually ready to spin up infrastructure in a much faster and more efficient way. So we are one step closer to achieving that first goal of going from 3 weeks to 5 days. Brilliant. So that's the kind of programmatic reporting that we love, because as I mentioned earlier, often training is the last thing that people consider when they're talking about transformation. If you can bring that forward and have this drive the rest of the program, it's going to make you way more successful. All right. So one of the other sort of areas we targeted was, that's right, Mark. So I've got a lot of stuff on this next slide. So just pop that up again, Mark. So I've sort of talked about how we might go about that one particular program and how we help parts of our business gain skills they need to achieve these business objectives that we set. So if I was to sort of boil those down to sort of generic areas, I've tried to do this with this nice slide here. So I think the first thing, as we identified earlier on, it's the behavioral change which slows you down the most, right? Because we're actually going to be asking people to do things differently, and not everybody's going to be happy about that. So we've really got to over-communicate the benefits of why they should do it this way. So that comes back to that why question. Everybody needs to know that we are transforming this business so that we have the opportunity to recruit or retain more customers. It's got to be at that level so that people go, right, I need to do this differently, otherwise we're not going to keep the customers we have. Simple as that. So a lot of that comes down to cultural and I suppose internal communications, where with any program, we've got to make sure that everybody understands the benefits for them personally and what the benefits for the organization are. So things that we can do to that is the overall readiness assessment helps us all understand where we are on a cloud adoption curve, what our current level of knowledge is on, say, DevOps or Agile, cloud technologies. It can be anything, right? And every transformation project is different and it has different components. But we can assess those, we can build these assessments quite quickly so that everyone in the organization understands that we're doing this thing, they understand where they are on that curve and what opportunity they have to learn these new skills. Okay, and the other side of it is just increasing the adoption of the technology. So, we try to make most of our training role-based. So that means that we do role-based assessments which help us identify the specific skills that teams need to do, or to achieve the outcome that we've decided we're going to set or plan for this 6-month program or whatever. And we also need to be able to recognize and reward people when they do that. So there's many ways we have to show and highlight success within our program. So whether it's badges or you've achieved this different level, we add a little bit of gamification into it to sort of allow people to sort of compete with each other. We find that's very, very successful at getting more people to start using these great tools so that your business gets more ROI from them. All right. Okay, so and the last stage of that progress, if you like, is really just the adoption of best practices. Because once we sort of set an overall goal, it might be to implement a DevOps culture. It might be to obviously build more customer trust, to improve our intellectual value, to modernize our business. All these things, those objectives all come back to having good best practices in the business, right? So security is not something that a few people need to do. Everybody in the business needs to understand how to work in a secure way when working with cloud services or with hosted services or any of the new technologies that are available to us today. All right, that's going to be a key requirement of your ongoing program to ensure that everybody is aware of what knowledge they need to have to do this successfully. So there's training plans that we do that help people just keep up to date with content. So if something's changed, like for example, security groups have been changed in the way that they're managed in AWS, well, we make sure that people know that so that everybody is aware of it and there's less likelihood of someone not knowing it and making a mistake. Also, just driving that sense of individual achievement, because if you don't have the individual's buy-in here, this program is always going to be difficult. You need to really reward them for the efforts that they've made, and to highlight that and show that. So anyway, I'm pretty much done here. The three things I think that we can look for proof points in these type of programs is obviously executive visibility, and the baseline program that we have, the infrastructure that we use gives you that ability to show these small steps done often so that your skills graph goes up. And so at the end of this program, at the end of this investment, if you like, you can show that you actually have achieved something that's going to get us one step closer to making this transformation a success. Now, that's a huge benefit, and one which I really see in the past. In the last 20 years I've been working in the internet industry, rarely would I see anyone who had that level of visibility. Training was just something you put money into and hope that it worked, right? This is quite different. This gives you actually a managed program to drive people towards a skill profile. It's fantastic. So that's what I call a knowledge graph. That's basically where your organization is with skills. You can see straight away where the gaps are. And of course, we can involve vendors as well. So we work with all of them, AWS, Azure, GCP, you name it. We can involve them in these transformation programs so that they can help you drive the level of knowledge you need if there's specific areas you want it. And it could just be the number of certifications, right? That is obviously something that we can definitely help with, but it's good to have that as part of your strategy, but not your all-in strategy. Okay, Mark, I think that's it from me. So if you have any questions for me, please just flick them to us in the box or email me. I'm more than happy to start a conversation and help you understand any of these things if there's been too much or too little.
Thanks, Andy. That's great. Yeah, and what I want to do now is drawing off what Andy has kind of brought forward and what we've seen is help you kind of understand from our perspective how we position the platform to address these areas. So the things that you have available to you to kind of help you meet these milestones and address some of the areas that Andy was referring to. I mean, training is not something that should be reactionary. We know that happens. I've been in the training industry for the better part of 6 years now, so I've definitely seen the reactionary side of things. I've seen it be very proactive too. Regardless of where you're at, we do have the ability to kind of meet you where you're currently at in that transformation and position it in a way to help you be successful. So with that, I'm going to draw a little context to how we actually have developed the platform and what it consists of. Andy talked a little bit about this. I'll be very brief on the slide here. We start off with what we call measurement. So the skill assessment is, again, your baseline to kind of figure out exactly what skills are already present in your organization, but more importantly, what is lacking. So kind of identifying where those gaps are, align those to what your transformational goals are so that we can kind of identify where you're at, and more importantly, to kind of know where you're going and what we need to do to get there. With that baseline skill assessment, what it's going to do is formulate a skill profile. This is real-time visualization of the skills that are possessed in your organization. So this is based off of their performance within the live hands-on labs, as well as quizzes and exams. But it starts with that initial skill assessment, which is your starting point, and they continue to build onto that as they move through their training plans. The next thing that we want to do is, the last thing that we want to do is give you a software that you're not using. So what we figured is that the best part is to put together a prescriptive and practice to try to get this done where people are being held accountable. It's actually something that they're finding useful, that they want to go into and learn. And that's where we come in with these learning paths. I'll show you very briefly in a moment what a learning path looks like. There's terminology, learning paths, and training plans. I want to make sure we're clear on what those are. But learning paths are a guided training experience, and that's comprised of the videos, the courses, as well as quizzes, hands-on labs, and subsequently exams. It's a learn, do, and validate model, which we'll show you here in a moment. And a big part of that are the hands-on labs. Andy hit on lab assessments. That's another component of it. But just being able to go through and pass a test and get a certification, although we know now more vendors are actually relying on your ability to go through and complete some of these labs to be certified, which I think is great. And I think it's going to become more prevalent. The labs on our platform are live within the consoles. You're able to go through and get that hands-on practical experience to better prepare you in your production environment, but also if you are going for certifications to help with that aspect too. And the last part is all wrapped up in this customization and control. So again, we want to give you the ability to be able to monitor and see how this process is going, see the real-time visualization of those skills. So we've got this training outcome management. That's where you can assign out this prescriptive training through a training plan. You assign a due date to it, people track against it, and with that becomes it's a 4 times more likelihood that the training actually gets done. So it's not just sitting on a shelf, you're checking a box, making training available, and hope people go to it. Like we have heard some of our customers that have come to us, and there's a stigma with digital or online-based training that, yeah, we had this, but it wasn't made, people didn't use it like we wanted them to. This is solving for that with the accountability factor. Content Engine, again, something very unique. I'll show you the UI for that momentarily. We won't get to a wide demo for that, but Content Engine gives you the ability to add context to the training in your stack. So you're able to create labs that fully mirror the way you're doing things in your stack. You're able to go in and adjust code and write your own quizzes and exams, create your own learning path, make it completely contextual to the way that you're actually using the services within your organization. And finally, with any specific type of software rollout, you would expect all these kind of robust role-based access control, kind of user management, analytics and reporting. I'll talk a little bit about that. Full-scale integration APIs, SSO, and LMS connectors as well. So with that, what I want to do is just quickly go into some brief parts of the platform itself. I will start off kind of on these enterprise features here where we start with teams. So the way we organize teams here are you're putting together groups of individuals that either could have the same kind of job role, whatever it may be, but they're really focused on whatever. When Andy was talking about the what or the why, what you're doing, what you're looking to accomplish, these are the people that are going to help you attack that specific goal. Could it be certifications? Yes. Could it be migrating over 25% of your legacy applications, into the cloud? Yeah, it could, whatever that is, you group those people together. They have the same skill objective that they're working towards. You put them in a team, and ultimately what happens is just for a baseline here is you can actually designate someone as a team manager. That's going to give that person the ability to kind of monitor the progress for their own individual team. So you may have an admin on the Cloud Academy account who's kind of like your super user. They're the ones who are adding people to the platform and adding people to teams. But by designating someone as a team manager, that person is able to kind of roll out assessments and training plans, monitor all the reporting and analytics as well. So it sets it up very nicely to take some of that burden off the admin and ultimately gives your people, your team managers that are responsible for the goals of their teams, ultimate control over what's being done and what they're working towards when it relates back to your overall digital transformation. Andy talked a little bit about assessments. So this is where we go in to get you that baseline, just to give you an idea of what some of these look like. These are some of the robust assessments that we have available. So again, some of the assessments on GCP, Azure, AWS, you've got a lot of different lab challenges that you could assign out to them. What you're actually going to get when you roll this out, I'll just pull up one here on AWS. Again, you're identifying some of the skill gaps that exist. So if I go over here to assignees, this is where I'm actually able to look at every individual on that assessment and how they scored. I'm able to kind of ascertain maybe what level of experience exists on my team already. Maybe someone scores particularly high in one of these assessments. They may have some skills that I didn't know already existed, and I can get detailed on those over here. But the real important readout are the gaps that exist on the team. So within the domains that were assessed on this minor assessment, these are some of the main domains that were assessed here. I get a readout of what level they're kind of working on, and then overall, where's my proficiency? Where does that lie within this actual team? So I can get a good baseline of where we need to go to attack some of these areas to help us reach whatever we're trying to do. From here, the next step would be to align a training plan to address that. So we've identified our teams. We've got the assessment where we've gotten our baseline skill set that exists and where the gaps are. And we want to start working towards a very prescriptive plan to attack some of these areas that we want to get our team shored up on. The process for a training plan is really simple, and a training plan just for so you understand it's one or more learning paths. And again, I'll show you a learning path in a moment, but it's one or more learning paths that you assign out with a due date and people track against it. There are two specific benefits to a training plan that we see. One, the accountability factor. So people are actually being held accountable. They're assigned and tracking against the due date. So they are going to come and use it and go and stay consistent to be able to stay up to date on their training plan. And two, particularly in a multi-cloud environment, which is becoming much more prevalent than maybe in the past, and we see this frequently, they may have to rotate and kind of change some areas. They may be on an AWS training plan, but something comes up in an Azure environment that they want to go look at. This is going to, because they're becoming used to the platform, it will create more of a familiarity for them, and they'll use that for other things as well. So they're going to be more likely to come and use this as a resource to get trained up on some of the areas that may not just be in their training plan, because they do have access to the entire content library. When you add a training plan cycle, very simple process here. So you see some of the custom training plans that were developed through Content Engine. We've got out-of-the-box role-based training plans, which are available for you to assign. No work necessary on your part. You can just ultimately go in and assign these as you see fit. But again, I'll just click on one here since we were talking DevOps before. This is, again, several different learning paths that are comprised of that comprise this overall training plan. So you've got some of the AWS cloud management tools, some configuration management, Docker with some containers, and then CI/CD here. And that comprise a holistic training plan for you to be able to assign out. You'll pick a team that you want to assign it to. You can actually make this training available to the team manager if you want as well. If not, you don't have to do that. And here's the part that you know how much time they have to train, so you know how important this training plan is to the overall development and what it's going to create by way of success going into your milestones. So you can dictate how much time per week they actually train. You see the slider bar here, it defaults to 3 hours, but based on when you need them to have this completed by, you can adjust the time here. Another thing, and Andy talked about this too, is this transparency, right? The objectives. Why are you doing this training? Context is everything. So we have made this minor UI improvement here where you can actually list why that training plan is actually being assigned out. It creates that context. It's transparency for those that are on the training plan. You're going to have, we want you to be able to contribute to this project, or we want you to be able to get this certification, whatever it may be. Add that up here, and that's been really appreciated on the end user side of things too. These nudges I'll talk about momentarily, but ultimately, once you review and confirm this, the email goes out to everyone on the team. They get weekly emails with their progress. The team manager gets a consolidated email for everyone on that actual training plan. And then you always have access to the management console here, so you can actually see holistically where the entire team is up here, every individual, their progress, average exam scores, because a learning path has more than one exam. This gives you a good idea of how well they're comprehending that information, the last time they've looked, and where they're tracking. And ultimately, if they're behind, you can turn nudges on automatically as well, but you can actually customize a message to send it out to everyone that's behind, and simply adjust this. And once it does, it'll track the number of times that they're nudged, and ultimately will be reported out in the email that comes to the team manager too. So now you've gotten your teams, you got your baseline with the assessment, and they're rolling into a training plan. I'm not going to go into analytics on this, but just know that we do have robust analytics that track the amount of time spent on the platform. You can get very granular in the learning activities by how much time people are spending on courses. You can see how well they're faring on some of the exams. If you're actually working towards certifications, this is an excellent tool for you to be able to see that, so you know who's ready to go and sit for that. The really important readout by way, and we use this a lot, and Ryan will talk about ROI, is what we call skill profiles, which again is that real-time visualization of the skills that are being acquired on your teams at the individual and then at the team level in and through their training on the Cloud Academy platform. This is fed again by the actual hands-on labs they're doing, the quizzes and the exams, and ultimately what you see here, I'm at the admin view, so I see my entire organization. If I was just looking at my specific team, I could do it. It's showing overall proficiency at the onset here, which is overall skills on the Cloud Academy platform. That's every cloud platform, every domain, every concept, every software. And you see skill growth rates. It's pulling up the top 3 cloud platforms here. And then you have your top users in the organization, which these are going to be those that are most proficient, again, overall. Where this becomes extremely efficient and the ability for you to know and hone in exactly on what you're looking to address so you can meet the needs of your business is when you actually go into these specific cloud platforms. So when I go over to AWS, you saw in that initial skill assessment where it's got just a couple of different domains on that baseline skill assessment. Here's every single domain within AWS that's available. So in the same type of behavior, I've got AWS overall. It defaults to the top three top three domains, I should say. I can come up here and adjust these and add more, but I continue to see my skill growth rate. And now I can identify the top users. And what I'm looking at now are those that are most proficient on the AWS platform. So who are my real practitioners, because they've demonstrated it in and through the labs, the quizzes, the exams, the assessments, et cetera, to get through and actually have a high score in these areas. And you can continue to delve into specific domains. So if security was an important area that you were looking to make sure maybe you had a specific project, you again get the same type of readout here. You can see the individual services, skill growth rate, but now I'm identifying my top users. So who are my real practitioners in the security domain within AWS? This is extremely useful for helping to see who can lead projects, who can kind of take charge with mentoring maybe some new people. But ultimately, when you're looking, and we have tons of organizations that do this, they'll incorporate this type of information into their quarterly performance reviews for employees to sit down to see, how much training they're doing, how that's contributing to their overall skills. So extreme value to organizations that sign up with Cloud Academy. Again, this is what we consider one of the more important returns on your investment. Finally, I'll just show really quickly on Content Engine. I just want to show you the UI. I'm not going to go into these because I want to be cognizant of time, but ultimately you can come in here, you can add in your own context to the training. I mentioned this early on in the first slide. Ultimately, you can upload custom resources, which would be static files, PDF, PowerPoint, whatever it may be. You can embed your own videos. You can link out to external content. You can tie specific skills to those. So if there's a custom skill that you want to make available, you can actually do that and have that feed into skill profiles as well. So if I had a PDF on security policies that I wanted to attach in here, I could ultimately go and test someone on how well if they read that information by creating some custom questions, rolling that up into an exam, and have that tie to a specific skill that would feed into their profile. Hands-on labs are very easy to modify as well. It's very simple in that you can come in here and pick. I said I wasn't going to go into it, but I'm just going to go really quickly. You can actually come in, pull over a specific step here, and if you wanted to change anything in that step, you simply click the pencil icon. You can come in and start adjusting this as well. Create your own provisioning templates. Extremely valuable tool for a lot of the organizations that we're working with who are really drawing the way AWS and Microsoft and GCP view their services may not be the way that you're actually using it in your organization. So we create context in everything. We want to do the same thing with our training too. And then subsequently, you can roll these into customized learning paths and assign those out through training plans as well. The UI for learning paths is very simple. We give you the ability to go in and clone labs, to clone exams, to clone learning paths, or you can create them from scratch. But ultimately, you'd simply come in here, you'd select a learning path that you want to. I'll just pick a random one here that Andy has done for Python. It's going to simply fill all this information out for you. You'll see that it sets where it's going to be placed in the library. Here's the skill objectives. Again, you can create the custom. And then the next thing that you're going to do after this is actually go in and start modifying. So if you had added a few steps, so maybe you created your own lab that you wanted to have available. Here we go. So you just created an exam. You had a lab that you had actually implemented here and maybe a custom resource that you'd put in. It's going to drop those in at the bottom, and you can drag and drop these wherever you want. So very easy to customize a learning path and then subsequently go and make that available. The great thing about Content Engine is it's available to everyone, not just admins or team managers. So if you have particular students or members of your teams that are skilled in certain areas, you can task them with going and creating these. Ultimately, they wouldn't be able to publish it. It'd have to be published by an admin. And the last thing that I'm going to show you here is just, again, to make clear on what a learning path is versus training plan. This is just a dashboard for the end users. Again, they have overall control over their skill profile. They can come in and change certain areas or train on certain areas that they want to go and take a look at as well. There's the gamification with leaderboards in here to show them where they rank. But at the dashboard level, they can launch their training plan as well. You'll notice there's a leaderboard to show the completion percentage, but ultimately if I wanted to pick up and start off with this particular learning path, you'll actually see what the steps are in here with that learn, do, and validate model. So I've got courses, I've got some labs, and then I'll have an exam at the end, which is going to test me on everything I learned. Again, these are live hands-on labs in their respective, consoles when they're going and working through those. So I just wanted to make sure we drew out some distinction on what a learning path is. Again, the platform was geared to the enterprise. We're talking about large teams here, but you can't really have an effective training program unless you've got something that's really fit for the end users that are going to be consuming it. So we have not built this at the expense of an end user. It's actually quite complementary of what you would see from an enterprise geared platform. So that was everything that I wanted to show you by way of the platform demo, kind of breezing through that a little bit. We'll have some opportunity for questions in a moment to go in through and answer some of those. But what I wanted to do was quickly pull back up and have Ryan walk through the customer success, which is a very key component to what we do here. It's a big differentiator in Cloud Academy. The fact that you have an assigned customer success manager to make sure you know how to use all these products and set up an effective training program moving forward. So with that, Ryan, I'll turn it over to you, man.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mark. So over the course of the next few slides, I'm going to talk to you about how we work with organizations, both large and small, to achieve that transformation using our white glove enterprise customer onboarding program. So this is just a high-level overview to share with you what our process looks like at a high level, our philosophy around onboarding, so that as a prospective enterprise customer, you can walk away with an understanding about the premium level of service you'll receive once you really get things kicked off. So our CS program begins with a comprehensive onboarding process, something that is actually pretty unique in the training space. In addition to the team that you've worked with up until this point, such as your strategic account manager, your solutions engineer, we'll also be assigning a dedicated customer success manager who will be responsible for the initial onboarding process, and then we'll continue to manage the account, the needs of the account throughout the entire term of service. We think this approach works well because it helps maintain account context, and we get to keep our relationships in place. We have a better understanding of your needs and training directions. There are lots of advantages to this approach with the goal of continuously delivering on the value that our platform promises. So with that, getting into slide content here, every time we're working with a new customer or even an existing customer with a new division or project, we're looking to achieve three main objectives during that onboarding process. So one, our top priority is to stay aligned with your business objectives. If there are reasons you're considering or have selected Cloud Academy, objectives you're trying to achieve, and we want to be synced up so that we're working together towards those required outcomes. Whether it's certifications, migration, managing the multi-cloud development project, setting up a CE program, we'll make sure that your onboarding and post-launch activities stay aligned with the needs of your training program and clearly connect with the outcomes you're expecting. The goal is to be in sync at all times and ensure that your business objectives stay on track to be met. Two, we help you launch a true training program in record time. And so in CS nomenclature, this really highlights our commitment to ensuring our customers receive the fastest time to value, starting with the initial user invites all the way through launch with all of our key features turned on. If you work for a large enterprise company, you probably use many different SaaS applications, so I'm sure you can appreciate the fact that the longer an implementation takes to get off the ground, the less likely it is to get that critical mass and really be successful and valuable investment. So I'm sure you'd agree that in the interest of both sides to get up and running as quickly as possible. So to that end, we'll provide clear instructions, training, milestones at every step to ensure maximum benefit in as little time as possible. And then we'll continue to coordinate and maintain urgency towards 100% adoption utilization throughout the entire term of service, not just during the initial onboarding period. And three, we do all this without the costly overhead of rework, and this speaks to minimal customer effort. Our onboarding program is intentionally designed to require minimal customer effort so that you and your team can remain as focused as possible on your core job responsibilities. So in addition to your account manager, solutions engineer, customer success manager, we'll bring in additional resources as needed from the content and product side to make sure that you're considering all aspects of cloud learning, and we can provide a very prescriptive approach to solving your business needs. But in short, we're looking to make the rollout of our application as easy and as smooth as possible by assuming as much responsibility for your success as possible. All right. Next slide, please, Mark. All right, so at a high level, our onboarding process consists of 5 stages. The first stage being preparation. This is where we do our initial discovery activities and are really focused on learning everything there is to know about your training needs. We're likely to know quite a bit at this stage because our sales and CS team work very much in lockstep to minimize customer rework and ensure a very smooth transition. But we'll formalize those requirements during our initial kickoff meeting, ensuring that input from all stakeholders is factored in. Most customers have certain outcomes in mind, project support, initiatives defined, certifications to achieve. Many times there are agreements with specific service providers, so we'll want to make sure we understand in as granular terms as possible what those needs are, what needs to be achieved, including any key performance indicators, so that we can factor it all into our unique customer success plans. Next, we'll have setup. So after we learn about your training needs, that's when we're going to come back and do the heavy lifting, helping to set up the platform, ensure all the licenses are filled by users, admins, and stakeholders. Because teams are the centralized unit within our platform and required for all of our key enterprise features, it will help arrange your users into teams, which you can also think of as more like a classroom where you're grouping users who require identical training at the same time. We'll recommend an initial set of assessments based on your user roles and to establish that baseline of skills, ensuring that we have something to measure against as we watch your organizational skill growth rate over time. So keeping your required outcomes and learning objectives in mind, we'll work with our content leads to customize content, build out the training plans, possibly even support an integration with our SAML-based SSO or one of our REST APIs. The next phase is enablement, creating expert users of the platform. But your designated CSM will assist with building expertise on how to properly manage a training program using Cloud Academy, using the series of admin, team manager workshops, and end user webinars to provide a direct channel to make sure they have an understanding of how to use those role-based features, how they work, and why they're valuable. Of important notice is our content engine feature, which Mark got into just a moment ago, which really takes the tools that our own content team has traditionally used internally to build out our own courseware, turning them around and making them customer-facing so that you as customers are enabled to build out content that reflects your technology stack. And finally, it's also an opportunity to level set with your users, explain what we're doing, why, and also reveal any compliance incentives or consequences. Next, we'll launch. So, once we're done with prep, setup, and enablement, presumably everything is set up just right, and we're ready to have hands on the software. We typically prefer a big bang approach where we get everyone launched once, but I certainly understand if that's not always possible, and we go with a phased approach. It really doesn't matter if we're onboarding a single team or an entire company. We'll follow this methodology and support the launch process as best we can, followed by regular meetings, adoption review, feature and utilization metrics to ensure the launch is as successful as possible. Finally, analysis. So during the initial stages of launch, we'll be hyper-focused on how that execution is going, starting with assessment cycles and training plan progress. And that process will continue throughout the term of service with periodic sync-up calls that are more tactical in nature, EBRs, or enterprise business reviews to stay aligned strategically, and then also allow for feedback, content requests, and feature requests to be considered for our roadmap. So at the end of the day, this is just a template that utilizes the best practices based on our experience with working with thousands of customers. It's meant to be efficient, but not so rigid that we can't accommodate some changes as needed. But we look forward to the challenge and opportunity to serve a broader base of customers with specialized needs. All right, next slide, Mark. All right, so here I just want to highlight some of the valuable resources available to you. Especially during the onboarding process, your CSM will take point on all communications as needed, and really, serve as the conduit into other functional areas as needed, including content, product, marketing, sales, and support. You can also find useful product info, submit feedback, or get expert assistance at our support portal at support.cloudacademy.com. And our training library and technical blogs are also available for you online. So that's it for me. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to having the opportunity to work with you all. Mark, back to you.
Okay, I've got it. I think we've got a couple of questions posted here. So what I'll do is I'm just going to try and answer a couple of these, which are good questions. I might need your help with this, Mark. The first one I've got here is, do we have any courses that ensure that students work on the CLI tools instead of just the AWS console? And to answer that for you, absolutely yes. The console is really the last place we get people to start. So understanding how to work in the command line is a crucial skill to have. So Mark, if I could just get you, just as an example, if you wouldn't mind just going back to the library and just typing in CLI as an example, just so I can highlight some of the content we've got in there. Yeah, it's a very important part of our library. We cover We cover things from the bottom up, right? So whether it's AWS, Azure, or GCP or whatever platform, we're about the core skills. So learning how to build things on the command line is a critical one. Yeah, so that, some of my favorites are that we've got, just basically hands-on learning for working with the CLI. We've got more sort of instructional content that helps you learn, why you need to use it and what the steps are, etc. But most of the lab challenges and lab steps we have really do take you from knowing very little to being an expert. Fantastic. Okay, another question I've got here is we have an attendee who's currently supporting Azure infrastructure as a service, cool, and looking to move to Azure platform as a service, PaaS. Is there a path to making that transition easy? Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's. I think you'll find in the library we've got certainly all of those kind of transitional aspects of working from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service covered. For the last 6 months, we've followed a very tight alignment with Microsoft's content. So we're very aligned to their certification programs, and just ensuring that people do have a lot of those migration services, the knowledge they need for running migration services and for working differently. And I'll just sort of precurse that with one of the key objectives we have, and for myself as head of content, what I think is most important is that we show you how to use these tools. We're not just talking about what they are and why you might use them. We're interested in telling you how you use these services to actually achieve business outcomes. So that's a very, very key part of what we do. Now, if there's anything in the library that we don't seem to cover that you think we should, I want you to reach out to us at support@cloudacademy.com and tell us, because our roadmap is based on your feedback. All right, we build our roadmap based on what content you need. I hope that answers your question. Please have a look under our Azure content library to see what we've got in there. I've got one other question here, which is how much presence do you have on Mexico and in Spanish? Yeah, now we have multi-language support for some of our most popular content. The Solution Architect Associate Learning Path, for example, has closed captions with Spanish. We have a plan to expand our coverage to be multilingual for as much of it as we can. Again, it's based on demand. So if there's any areas that you think we could add more multi-language support, I'd be really interested in hearing that. One other question here, is there a path for Linux Foundation exams with on-hands learning, lab learning? Yeah. So we sort of, for the Linux Foundation exams, we focus more on Kubernetes and Azure and AWS for the last 9 months. So our Linux content is more about practical usage of Linux tools. So the Foundation exams is one thing we have on our backlog. So it's good to hear that you're asking about that.
All right. I think that got through the remainder of the questions that we had. If there's other questions that you do have, we would love for you to reach out. Andy did mention the support@cloudacademy.com. In addition to the fact that, we would love to set up time to walk through some of these very specific areas that you may have in your organization, some things you're trying to solve for. It's always great for me, and I know for Ryan and Andy, if it wasn't, hopefully we made this pretty clear how passionate we are in being able to address these and create the outcomes, help you achieve the outcomes you're looking to work towards. Being able to draw context specifically to what you're trying to solve for is something that we regularly do in and through the demos. So if you would like to walk through and look with someone like myself from the solutions engineering team or Ryan and have Andy as well, contact us through sales@cloudacademy.com. We'd be happy to set up some time to walk through that. Again, everything was a little abbreviated today to condense and get through all the content that we have. But we have thoroughly enjoyed being able to speak with you and share a little bit about what we do here and what we're looking to help you solve for. Andy and Ryan, I'm very much appreciative of your time. I enjoy working with you guys. And again, we're very grateful for you all joining us. If you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out, sales@cloudacademy.com. We will be at Microsoft Ignite, AWS reInvent. Feel free to check up with us if you come to any of those areas too. again, thank you much to everyone who's joined, and we do hope you have a fantastic afternoon, evening, and rest of your morning for whatever time it is there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.